I am so glad you guys are back with us for Bible class today. So we are headed to the desert and to a special mountain that I have a puzzle for you to figure out what mountain it is. So first, let me give you the puzzle. Now remember, this is the rebus, and pictures represent words. So sound this out in your head. What mountain do you think this is? If you know, unmute yourself and tell me. Mount. What is that thing in the middle? A sign.
Mount Sinai.
Yes, you nailed it. Mount Sinai. Man, that was a tricky one, wasn't it? Awesome, Mount Sinai. We're going there today. I mean, virtually, but it'll be the real place. So, Mount Sinai, it is. All right. Before we get there, we have to remember where we are in the world. So, hopefully, Diesel and Petra, you remember this song from last week. Sky, you'll have to help me lead it, okay? And Finn, too. Here we go. Tell me the continents, tell me the continents, tell me if you can. North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa. Don't forget Australia. Don't forget Antarctica. Tell me the continents, tell me the continents, tell me if you can. Very good. Now, what continent do we live on right now? Someone tell me.
North America.
Yes, North America. Very good. And where do many of our Bible stories happen? Are they on the continent of North America? Are they on the continent of South America? Let's find out. We're going to fly there on Google Earth. We're going to leave North America, fly over the Atlantic Ocean, across the continent of Africa, and we're zooming in on the Bible lands. But you notice there's kind of like a V-shaped piece of land. Do you see that in the middle? Okay, without touching your screen, maybe point to it on your end. It says Mount Sinai, kind of there in the V. Do you see that? That's the Sinai Peninsula. Now, peninsula is a geography term you'll learn in school too, and it's a body of or a piece of land that has water on three sides. Do you see all the water around it? On the north side is the Mediterranean Sea, and on the south you've got the Red Sea, right? And then there's a Gulf there on the right. That's the Sinai Peninsula. And we're headed there today in our Bible story. So we've been talking about friendship, and what is friendship and how does it work? And so last week when we talked about Jonathan and David, we learned that friendship equals, it's math. Who knew you were going to have to do math in Bible class, huh? Friendship equals words plus actions. So you have to say kind words, and then if your friend needs help, you've got to actually take action and help. So that's what we're talking about today, but with this character. Can you answer this flashcard question? This was my Grandma Betty's flashcard. She had a whole stack of these, and she would quiz us in Bible class. Does anybody know this answer? Who went to heaven in a chariot of fire?
I remember the story. Elijah.
Yes, Elijah with a J. Yeah,
We
very good.
learned that at school, so.
Perfect. Oh, this is perfect timing. Very good. Yeah. So we're talking about Elijah and his friend Elisha today. It's a little confusing because their names are like one letter apart. But that's okay. That's okay. So I want you to imagine, what if in your life, what if no one listened to you and you felt very lonely? Have you ever felt that way before? Think about a time maybe when you felt like nobody listened to you. Maybe in school, right? When all the kids were doing something they shouldn't be, maybe, and you were like, no, guys, we can't do that. But nobody listened. and then you were all by yourself because you didn't join in, right? Or I'm sure you can think of several times maybe where you felt like just nobody listened to you. That's how Elijah felt in our story today. So before he was taken up to heaven in that chariot of fire, we're going to learn about a time when he was really discouraged. Okay, so this scene behind me, we're in the desert, and this is a broom tree. Now, a broom tree is a nice place that brings shade in the desert. And when Elijah had just done maybe the biggest event of his whole life, he had gone up to Mount Carmel, and there were prophets of Baal, who was a false god. And Elijah tried to tell them that there's one true God, and you should be following the one true God. And he even, remember the whole story about he built an altar and he poured water on it, and then God sent fire from heaven, and they still didn't believe. And so Elijah came away from Mount Carmel so discouraged because all those prophets, like, they still wouldn't believe, and nobody, it seemed, wanted to follow God. He loved God, and he was so passionate. He wanted everyone to follow God. And he was really disappointed when they didn't. And so he felt like he was all alone and by himself. And on top of that, after the situation on Mount Carmel with those prophets of Baal, the queen of Israel, Queen Jezebel, wanted to hurt Elijah. And so he was afraid for his life. So he comes down Mount Carmel and he runs into the desert. And he ends up under this broom tree, or maybe a tree like it. But this is a tree that's found in the desert today, in the Negev desert in southern Israel. And it is the same tree they think might have been the burning bush back with Moses. So that's kind of cool. But it makes really good warm fires. And so if you take some of the branches off and you make a nice fire, you can cook food with it. So Elijah runs into the desert, afraid for his life and so discouraged because nobody believes him, and he's very lonely. And he sits under this tree, and you know what he says to God? I quit. Elijah, the most passionate prophet in the whole Old Testament. If you would have pictured one person who loved God the most, it might have been Elijah. And he's so discouraged, he just says, I'm done. I quit. He must really feel awful. But you know what God did? God fed him lunch and let him have a good nap. And Elijah felt much better after that. Actually, it says an angel brought him food on hot coals, hot, fresh bread, and a nice, cool jar of water. And that refreshed him because he had a big journey ahead of him after this. Elijah wanted to talk to God in person. And so what he did, after sitting under the shade of this nice tree, he spent 40 days and 40 nights going all the way to Mount Sinai. And this is what it looks like today on Google Maps. So you can still go there today. It's a real place. And this is one of several places that we think might be Mount Sinai. I'll show you a picture in a minute. But look at this map. If you look on the left, on the bottom, you can see the elevation change. That's how high you are up in the mountains, and then how low you go in the valleys. Well, this is the elevation map of the whole trip. And you can see he's going from Mount Carmel all the way up to Mount Sinai. And so there's an elevation increase. Mount Carmel is near the Mediterranean, so it's a little bit lower in elevation. Still a really big hill, but Mount Sinai is a huge mountain. So this one takes 125 hours to go by foot. It's about 377 miles. I think that's like from here to St. Louis, right? Long time. Even by car today, it's a long time. But imagine walking it by foot in sandals in the heat. So this is where he ended up. We think there's several different mountains that could be Mount Sinai, but I'm going to show you this one because the views are stunning. Look, can you imagine being up on that mountain like Elijah or even Moses talking to God? Holy cow, it's huge. And so Elijah gets to Mount Sinai, and he hears the voice of God who says, Elijah, what are you doing here? Like God was surprised. I don't think he was surprised. I think he knew Elijah was coming, but he's like, what are you doing here? And he asks him twice, what are you doing here? Well, so Elijah explains how sad and frustrated and disappointed he is because nobody is listening to him and following God. And he doesn't know what to do anymore except to give up. And God says, you know what? You need a buddy. You need a friend. And so he told Elijah to go to a certain town to find a man named Elisha. And that was going to be his friend and later his successor, the guy who took over after him. But this is the scripture where we see how disappointed Elijah is. He says, the Israelites have turned their backs on your covenant. I'm the only one left. So that's in 1 Kings chapter 19. And if you want to go read that with your family, it's 1 Kings chapter 19, and then the next part is in 2 Kings chapter 2. And you'll see Elijah was just so frustrated and sad and didn't know what to do. And he thought he was the only one left. But it turns out God surprised him and said, no, you're not the only one left. I have 7,000 people just like you in Israel who still follow me. Wow, that's pretty cool. So how come Elijah hasn't met them yet? Well, I think he's about to, because God sends him back into the mainland of Israel. And here's the map. So he has to go all the way from the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. We think, remember, there's 2 locations for Sinai. This is what we're landing on today. We're going from Sinai all the way up in the Jordan River Valley, kind of following, past the Dead Sea, up the Jordan River, to the hometown of Elisha. Now, Elisha is a very interesting guy. His family were very wealthy, owned a lot of land, and you can see Elisha in this a demo picture. What's he doing? What's it look like he's doing? Is he what?
He's leading cows?
Yes.
Animals.
That's right. Good job, Case. Yeah, he is leading oxen. And he's plowing a field. That wooden thing behind the oxen that he's holding onto is a plow. Now, today in Kansas, we use combines, tractors, right? Tractors and yeah. Back then, it was all by hand. And so Elijah shows up to Elisha's house. He puts his coat on him and basically says, come, follow me. And Elisha says, wow, that's amazing. But let me go say bye to Mom and Dad. And so they did, and they had a big party, and they said goodbye because they didn't know if they get to see Elisha again because he was going on a long road trip with his new friend Elijah. Now, this is where they went. They went to a lot of different places to talk to people about God. And so up in the north, you can see, okay, this is really cool. When I looked this up in Google Maps, I got results in 3 different languages.
Whoa.
In Google Maps. So if you look on the left, you can see my destinations over here in the blue. And the very top one is the town where Elisha was from. And it switched from English to Hebrew. So those are Hebrew characters. And then you can see Gilgal is still in English. And then underneath it is a beautiful scripty language, which is the village of Beitin, which used to be ancient Bethel. And it's in Arabic. So we have Hebrew, English, and Arabic. That's pretty cool. But look at the elevation on the bottom left. You can see this starts in Elisha's hometown, and which today it's kind of in ancient ruins, but there are some small villages around it. But it's almost below sea level, or maybe it is below sea level. Look, it says negative 925 feet.
Wow.
It's because he's in that Jordan River Valley, which is, especially the Dead Sea, the lowest point on Earth. And so, look, he has to go all the way up to Gilgal and then north of Jerusalem. Remember, Jerusalem was on big hills. And so you can see how they had to climb up lots of hills. You can see the elevation rise. That's a lot of traveling. And then they ended up in Jericho. We learned about Jericho. We'll talk about it more in a minute. But let's recap what we've seen so far. So friendship equals words plus actions. So what did Elisha say? He said, I won't leave you to Elijah. Because remember, Elijah kind of got discouraged sometimes. But Elisha said, no, I'm going to stick with you for all of these road trips, and I'm not leaving your side. And so that was his action. He went with him. So at the end of their road trips, they end up in Jericho, and God lets them know that he's about to take Elijah up to heaven. So Elijah didn't die like normally happens to humans, right? He didn't die. He wasn't buried. There was not really a funeral. God took him in a different way, which I'll show you in a moment. But they knew this was going to happen. They were prepared for it. They knew it was coming. And so that one of the very last things Elijah said to Elisha was, what can I do for you before I'm taken away from you? That's him being a friend. What can I do for you? And so this is that story that I quizzed you about earlier. Who went to heaven on a chariot of fire? There's Elijah in this chariot. This is how an artist pictures it. Giuseppe Angeli is the artist here. He painted this in the 1700s AD. And this is what he thought it looked like. And so Elijah said, well, what can I do for you? Man, if you were Elisha, what would you ask for? That's a big question. So Elisha asks if he can have a double portion of Elijah's spirit, his passion, his ability to do miracles that comes from God. And so that's what he asks for. And the action is, after Elijah went up on that fiery chariot, his coat fell off and came down to Elisha. So I think that was a yes. And we know that Elisha received God's power to be a great prophet in Israel, because one of the first things he did in that city of Jericho, he went and he healed their water. Their water source was bad and might have made people sick. And so he went there, and there is a recording later in 2 Kings chapter 2 of how Elisha healed their water with God's power, but because Elijah gave him that special coat. Pretty cool. And this is what it looks like there today in Jericho. They actually have Elisha's spring, where they say that he healed the water. So that's a pretty great story. So it started off with Elijah having a no good, very bad day, and going all the way 40 days and nights to Mount Sinai to talk to God about it, right? God gives him food, a nice nap, and God says, you're going to have a new friend to come with you. And that's how he met Elisha. And Elisha was there to help Elijah. So remember our memory verse, a friend, here, read it with me. A friend loves at all times. They are there to help when trouble comes. Mm-hmm. And Elijah had a lot of trouble. And so Elisha was there with him the whole way as they traveled around telling people about God. And so we have a good example of friendship with Elijah and Elisha. Now, last week with Jonathan and David, we talked about how their friendship wasn't just words and actions, it was really love, right? They loved each other as best friends. And this week, with Elijah and Elisha, we can see that they encouraged each other, because Elijah was so discouraged. And when Elisha came on board, he encouraged him to keep going and to keep doing what God needed him to do. And so they're a great example of friends who encourage. Now, in your life, you have friends. Have they ever been discouraged before and you were able to go and cheer them up or push them to do better? Think about that this week as you go back to school and are around your friends. How can you show good friendship by encouraging your friends? So think about that and do it this week. So remember, now everybody can answer this. Who went to heaven in a chariot of fire? Everybody together? Elijah. Yes, Elijah. Grandma Betty would be very happy. You got your trivia question right. Now, next week, we're going to learn about another friendship. This will be our last one in our friendship series. We're learning about Jesus and Peter, who were very good friends until Peter made a huge mistake. And then what happened to their friendship? So come back next week. We're going to learn about forgiveness and how being a good friend means that you forgive. So I can't wait to see you guys next week. Thanks for coming today. We're all done. I'll see you guys later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.